My phone buzzed on Thanksgiving morning, and I smiled without looking, assuming it was Grandpa texting me back. I just left him a voicemail saying I couldn't wait to see him. It had become a quiet tradition calling him first before anyone else. He always answered, except this time he didn't. Then the message lit up my screen. "Don't worry about your grandpa. We told him not to come. Cynthia doesn't want him there." I froze. My hands trembled around the coffee mug I hadn't even taken a sip from. My cinnamon rolls were burning in the oven, but I couldn't move. That message, it didn't just ruin a holiday. It rewrote something inside me. Grandpa wasn't just family. He was my family. The one who showed up when everyone else made excuses. The one who remembered my birthday when Dad forgot. The one who cried with me at Mom's funeral when no one else did. And now he was being erased. For the sake of Cynthia's aesthetic, I grabbed my keys. I didn't even put on socks. I just drove. By the time I pulled up to Grandpa's house, it wasn't the silence that struck me. It was the flashing red lights. The ambulance was already there. The front door hung open. His mailbox leaned crooked on its hinge. He always fixed it every Saturday, but not this morning. Not after that message. I sat in the car and stared. Something inside me said, "This is the day everything changes." And it did. When I was a little girl after my mom died, Grandpa Arthur became the only adult who looked me in the eye when I cried. Not with pity, not with frustration, but with presence. He wasn't loud about it. He never sat me down for some big emotional talk. He just made pancakes, or played old jazz records, or sat with me on the porch while the sun dipped behind the pine trees. After Dad remarried, Cynthia, things changed. Not all at once at first, it was just little things. Cynthia didn't like Grandpa's stories, said they were outdated. She didn't like how he wore suspenders at the dinner table, said he looked like a relic. Then came the comments about how elderly energy could ruin the vibe of a modern gathering. And Dad, he didn't push back. He just let it happen. But Grandpa never said a word. He just kept showing up for me. He sent me postcards from road trips even after I moved away for college. Brought flowers to my art show when no one else came. Gave me a box of Grandma's old recipe cards just in case he said you ever want to make something that feels like home. I still keep that box on my kitchen shelf. The year I graduated, Dad skipped the ceremony for a work trip. Cynthia sent me a $50 Amazon card, Grandpa. He drove 5 hours to surprise me with a frame for my diploma. He wore a navy tie, same tie he wore at my mother's funeral, same tie he later wore when I landed my first job, and he showed up with a cupcake and a candle. So when I called him that Thanksgiving morning and he didn't answer, something already felt off. I thought maybe he was napping or in the shower. He was 83 after all, but still sharp, still active, still Grandpa. But then that text came, and my stomach dropped. "Don't worry about your grandpa. We told him not to come. Cynthia doesn't want him there." Like he was a misplaced casserole dish. Like he wasn't the reason I even bothered coming home for Thanksgiving anymore. I reread the text 5 times, then again. My fingers trembled. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then something in me snapped, not with rage, not with panic, but with certainty. I put on boots, grabbed my coat, and drove. I didn't know what I was going to say. I just knew I had to see him, had to make sure he knew he mattered to someone. By the time I reached his block, something felt wrong. The street was too quiet, the air thick with something I couldn't name. Then I saw it, the ambulance, parked crooked in his driveway, rear doors open. 2 paramedics moving fast inside the house. The porch lights still on, the screen door swinging lazily in the wind. A neighbor, Mr. Callahan, stood near his fence cardigan, flapping in the cold. He spotted me and hurried over. "Sophia," he said, breathless. He collapsed, right on the top step. He was just standing there. My knees buckled. I grabbed the car door to steady myself. Did he say anything? I asked, barely above a whisper. Mr. Callahan hesitated, his gray brows knit together. He was looking at the road. Said something like, "Maybe they'll change their minds." Then he just dropped. I ran to the porch. Paramedics were already wheeling him out, oxygen mask in place, IV bags swinging. One paused beside me. He's unconscious but breathing. We're taking him to County General. I'm coming too, I said, no hesitation. They nodded and I turned back toward my car. Then buzz, my phone, Dad again. I answered, voice taut. Grandpa collapsed. There was a pause. Then his voice came flat, almost bored. He's just being dramatic, Sophia. You know how he is. It felt like a slap. I stopped walking. What does that mean? It means he's always trying to make things about him. Cynthia didn't want him there. We asked nicely. Maybe he took it the wrong way. My voice rose despite myself. He was dressed in a full suit, standing on the porch, waiting for you. Dad sighed. I didn't say he was faking, just overreacting. That was it. I ended the call. As the ambulance pulled away, sirens cutting through the cold morning air, I followed in my car vision, blurry from tears I didn't even realize were falling. But they weren't from fear. They were from the truth, finally ripping through everything I thought I understood about family. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal. And I would never be silent about it again. The emergency room lights buzzed like angry insects overhead. I sat alone on one of those hard plastic chairs, gray and unforgiving, clutching my coat in my lap like it could keep me from unraveling. People moved around me, nurses wheeling carts, someone sobbing quietly behind a curtain. But all I could hear was Grandpa's voice echoing in my memory, soft and hopeful. Maybe they'll change their minds. I stared at the scuffed tile floor and tried to hold myself together. Then a nurse approached. Mid-40s, maybe, her eyes soft behind tired glasses. She glanced down at a clipboard, then looked back at me. You're Sophia, yes. I stood up so fast the chair screeched against the floor. She held out a sealed envelope. Your grandfather had this in his pocket. He said, if anything ever happened and you were the first to arrive, I should give it to you. The envelope was thick, cream-colored. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, elegant, slanted, cursive, in blue ink. For Sophia, if it's ever too late to say it out loud. I sat down before I could open it because my legs didn't feel solid anymore. I stared at the paper like it might vanish if I blinked. My fingers trembled as I slid one under the flap and tore it open. The scent of his house clung faintly to the paper, old wood, and cinnamon. I unfolded the letter. If you're reading this, Sophia, then I probably didn't get the chance to tell you the truth in person, but I need you to know something. I'm proud of you. More than you'll ever know. I always have been. You didn't just grow up. You grew strong, kind, steady. You became the kind of person your mother would have been proud of, too. I tried to be there in all the ways I knew how. Maybe not perfectly, but with my whole heart. After Grandma died, I held on as tight as I could for your sake, for what we had left. But these past few years, your father's been different. And last week, he came by. Not to invite me to Thanksgiving. To tell me not to come at all. I stopped reading. My vision blurred. He told him. I scanned the rest, my heart hammering. Cynthia said I was too old-fashioned, that I made guests uncomfortable. And your father, he didn't argue. He told me to my face I was no longer welcome. I tried to understand. I told myself maybe it was stress. Maybe they'd change their minds. But I still ironed my suit. I still made the pumpkin pie. I still waited. I didn't want you to think I didn't come because I didn't care. I came every year because you were there. By the time I finished the letter, my hands were shaking with rage. My throat felt raw. Grandpa hadn't misunderstood. He hadn't misheard. They came to his home, to his door, and erased him from his own family. And still, he hoped. He got dressed. He baked. He waited. That's what shattered me the most. Even after being cast aside like an afterthought, he held on to the possibility that someone, anyone, might remember his worth. I sat there in that waiting room letter on my lap, heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to outrun the truth. A small, stubborn part of me still wanted to believe it had been a misunderstanding. Maybe Dad was pressured. Maybe Cynthia said something awful and he didn't know how to respond. Maybe he regretted it. But Grandpa never lied to me. And that letter, it was clarity. It was proof. It was love written by a man who knew his absence would be twisted into silence. And I knew what would happen next. They'd gaslight. They'd say he was confused, that he misheard, that he imagined it, that he chose not to come. I couldn't let that happen. I needed evidence. So I left the hospital and drove straight to Grandpa's house. The porch light was still on. The steps where he collapsed looked smaller now somehow, like they were holding a secret. His hat was still beside the door right where he must have dropped it. I picked it up, pressed it to my chest for just a second. Then I used my spare key and stepped inside. The air inside was warm. He must have turned the heat up early expecting guests. His dining table was set for one, a single placemat, a slice of pumpkin pie still wrapped in foil, a can of whipped cream unopened beside it. My knees nearly gave out. I wandered to the living room. The old knit blanket was folded neatly over the couch arm. Everything was exactly where it should be. And then I remembered the security camera. After a few neighborhood break-ins last year, Grandpa had asked me to help him install a discreet camera above the bookshelf. I'd synced it to his old laptop. I opened the laptop, pulled up the local footage file, clicked play. The timestamp read 5 days ago. I watched as the doorbell camera caught it all Dad and Cynthia on the porch. Grandpa still in his cardigan. I turned the volume up and watched the truth destroy whatever was left of my illusions. Dad Arthur. Let's not drag this out. Don't come Thursday. It's not up for discussion, Grandpa. But it's Thanksgiving. I've always come. Cynthia. This year's just different. We've got guests, a modern vibe. You wouldn't enjoy it, Grandpa. Grandpa. But Sophia, she'll expect to see me. Dad, we'll tell her something. Just don't come. Then they turned, walked away. And Grandpa just stood there, on the porch, holding the door, watching them leave like a ghost nobody noticed. I paused the video. My own reflection in the laptop screen stared back at me, red eyes, clenched jaw breath catching in my throat. That was it. The truth. Unfiltered. Undeniable. They hadn't just forgot to invite him. They came all the way here just to cut him out. Still, he made pie. He ironed his suit. He stood in the cold, hoping they'd change their minds. They never did. And now he lay unconscious in a hospital bed, and the only apology he had ever received was from me. Not anymore. This time I wouldn't just show up for him. I would fight for him. Part 3. Silent Counterattack. The post that set. Fire to the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I curled up on Grandpa's couch, wrapped in the soft knit blanket he always kept folded on the armrest for guests. His letter sat on the coffee table in front of me, unopened again, like it was keeping vigil. The only sound in the room was the quiet ticking of the wall clock. It should have been a comfort, but every tick felt like a countdown, like something inside me was about to rupture. I wasn't crying anymore. That part had passed. Now I was burning. Not with grief, but with clarity. For so long I'd second-guessed myself. I'd wondered if maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Cynthia wasn't that cruel. Maybe Dad was just tired, caught in the middle. Maybe this family wasn't intentionally erasing the only person who ever showed up for me. But the video, the words, it's not up for discussion. There was no maybe anymore. The next morning, after checking with the hospital, Grandpa was stable but still unconscious. I drove home, took the fastest shower of my life, and sat down at my desk. In front of me, the footage. No editing, no dramatic music. Just cold truth caught on camera. I opened my social media account, the one I rarely used except for the occasional art post or birthday wish. I stared at the empty status box for a long time. Then I started typing. Slowly at first, then faster. The words poured out like they'd been waiting years for me to let go. Yesterday, my grandfather collapsed on his front porch, alone, in the cold, dressed in his best suit. Why? Because 5 days ago, My father and stepmother came to his house and told him not to come to Thanksgiving. I have the footage. He still dressed up. He still made pumpkin pie. He still waited. He collapsed, waiting for people who never showed up, people who used to be called family. I attached the video. Raw. Unfiltered. The moment Grandpa opened the door and Dad said, "Just don't come." The stunned silence. The long, empty porch. Then I added one last line before hitting post. Some say family is everything. I say family is the people who show up, not the ones who push you aside. And then I hit publish. I didn't expect it to go viral, but it did. Within an hour, my inbox was flooded. Comments poured in first from friends, then strangers, then names I hadn't heard in over a decade. Mr. Monroe was my English teacher. He gave me my first poetry book. He was the only adult who noticed I was sleeping in my car after my mom got sick. That man helped me pass senior year. I owe him my degree. Story after story. People remembered Grandpa Arthur not just as an old man, but as a guidepost in their lives. But it wasn't just love that came pouring in. Cousins messaged me. My Aunt Dad's older sister, who moved to Colorado, emailed, "Is this real? Did Greg actually say that?" Another message read, "I always knew Cynthia was cold, but this is unforgivable." Yes, it was all real, and now it was public. By sunset, my post had been shared over 100,000 times. A journalist from the local station DM'd me asking for an interview, but the message that changed everything came late that night. It was from someone named Elliot Tran. "Hi, Sophia. I'm a lawyer now, but your grandfather was my favorite teacher in high school. I saw your post. If you need help protecting him financially or legally, please let me know. He's a good man. He doesn't deserve this." I stared at the screen, stunned. I hadn't even thought about legal steps, but as soon as Elliot said it, I knew he was right. This wasn't just about what they did emotionally. They hadn't just excluded Grandpa. They'd been using him. Quietly. Systematically. Financially. I remembered the times Grandpa said things like, "Had to help Greg out with rent this month," or "paid off one of Cynthia's hospital bills again." I don't mind. It's family. At the time, I'd nodded. Now I saw the pattern. That night, I drove back to Grandpa's house. I knew where he kept his files, an old wooden box on the bottom shelf of his living room bookshelf, hidden behind a dusty globe. I found it, and what I saw inside made my stomach twist. He had organized everything. Binders labeled by year, pages neatly clipped, receipt statements, withdrawal slips. His handwriting on the tabs always careful, always clear. But here's what stood out. Monthly transfers to Greg Monroe, $800 and $200. Scanned copies of support agreements notarized but never filed, signed by Grandpa. Payments to Cynthia's private hospital. Tuition labeled Tommy a child who wasn't even related to us. They weren't just emotionally cruel, they were draining him. No repayment, no acknowledgement, no gratitude, just silent extraction. And then one transaction from last Christmas, $5,000 wire transfer. Memo to help Greg get through the holidays. I stared at the line item like it could speak. The same holidays they told him not to come. The same holidays where he collapsed on the porch in his best suit. I took out my phone, snapped photos of every page, sent them to Elliot. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. "There's a case here," he said, his voice even. "Not just civil. This could qualify as elder financial abuse. We can freeze the accounts immediately." I pressed the phone to my ear. My hand was shaking, but I didn't flinch. "Do it," I said. No more benefit of the doubt. No more protecting their reputation. No more silence. If this was the only language they understood, then it was time they heard me. They came 3 days later. No call. No warning. I had just come back from the hospital pharmacy arms full of Grandpa's new medications when I saw them standing on his porch like they still belonged there. Dad was in his wool coat, hands shoved deep into his pockets. His shoulders looked tight like he was holding something in anger, maybe. Guilt Cynthia stood beside him, oversized sunglasses masking half her face, her mouth pinched into that usual flat smile that always seemed an inch away from contempt. They saw me pull in. I parked slowly, got out even slower. The cold bit at my cheeks, but the anger rising inside kept me warm. "Hi, Sophia," Dad said. I locked the car and walked up the driveway. "We need to talk," he added. I didn't smile, didn't blink, just said I figured you might. After the internet found out who you really are. He flinched. Cynthia stepped forward, arms folded tight across her chest. "This has all been blown out of proportion. Your grandfather was never excluded. We just suggested it wasn't the best year. You told him on camera," I interrupted. "It's not up for discussion. You looked him in the eyes and told him not to come." "I have the footage, Cynthia." Dad cleared his throat. "You took that out of context." "No," I said. "You took him out of context, out of the picture, out of the family." They stared at me like they didn't recognize the person in front of them, and maybe they didn't, because this wasn't the daughter who smiled and swallowed things to keep the peace. This was someone who had finally seen the cost of their silence. "I came to apologize," Dad said stiffly. "We both did." "No," I replied. "You came because the post went viral. Because Elliot sent the cease and desist notice. Because the withdrawals were frozen. He didn't deny it." I stepped forward, looked him dead in the eye, and for the first time in my life, I didn't call him Dad. I said, "Greg, you didn't just ban your own father from Thanksgiving. You used him. Financially, emotionally. You drained him like a checking account. And then when he didn't fit Cynthia's modern vibe, you threw him out." Cynthia's mask cracked. "Okay, that's uncalled for." "No," I said coldly. "What's uncalled for is the $5,000 wire transfer labeled holiday support that you took last year, only to ban him from that very holiday. What's uncalled for is treating the man who raised me like he was your problem instead of your father." Dad's face darkened. "We're still your family, Sophia," I laughed. "Once, bitter and small. No, Grandpa is my family. The man who showed up. The man who made me waffles when I was sick, who clapped at my recitals, who wore the same tie to every celebration because it mattered to him. I pointed a finger at Greg. And Cynthia used him like a lifeline, and when you didn't need him anymore, you cut the rope." He took a step forward. "Sophia, we came to make things right." "No," I said. "You came to protect yourselves, your reputation, your money, your control." A silence bloomed between us, cold and stiff as the wind. A few brown leaves scraped across the sidewalk behind us, whispering like ghosts. "He almost died waiting for you to change your mind," I said. Voice shaking now, not with fear, but with fury. Greg looked like he'd been punched in the chest. He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I spoke to the lawyer," I added. "We've already filed for conservatorship. The bank accounts are secured. Every transfer is documented. Every check you cashed, every payment you justified under helping Dad out, it's all going to court." Cynthia's voice turned shrill. "You're making a mistake. This could destroy the family." "What family?" I asked. And I meant it. Because for years I'd been holding on to the fantasy that we were still something whole, still repairable. But now I saw the rot, and it had a name. "I'm not doing this out of revenge," I said. "I'm doing it because he deserves to feel safe again. And because people like you who steal warmth from someone and then call them clingy don't get to walk away without consequences." Greg's jaw tightened. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. "I wrote something, in case I couldn't say it right. I didn't take it. You can give that to the judge," I said. And then I turned. I opened the door and stepped inside, not waiting for them to say anything else. Grandpa was napping on the couch, the afternoon sun warming the room in soft gold. The old quilt was pulled up to his chest. The house smelled like lavender and faint cinnamon, like memory and safety. I sat beside him, took his hand. "We're okay now," I whispered. But I knew the fight wasn't over. What they took from him, from me, couldn't be undone. But it could be exposed, and I was just getting started. The next day, I stood outside the Monroe County Courthouse heart, thudding like a war drum. In my hands was a manila envelope, inside everything. Screenshots of the monthly transfers to Greg, The notarized family assistance agreements never filed. Cynthia's medical bills Grandpa had paid. The footage from the door camera. And Grandpa's letter. The one addressed to me, if it's ever too late to say it out loud. Elliot met me on the courthouse steps. His navy wool coat was sharp against the gray winter sky. He didn't smile, just gave a nod. "You sure?" he asked. I nodded. They left him on the porch to collapse alone. I'm sure. We filed the petition that morning, conservatorship fraud, financial elder abuse, and petition for emergency guardianship. Within the hour, a temporary order was granted. I now had the legal authority to protect Grandpa's assets, his health care, and his dignity. I didn't do it to hurt them. I did it because it was the only way to stop them. Word spread quickly. The story had already gained traction online, but once the courthouse documents went public, it exploded again. A local journalist ran a headline that made me choke up the first time I saw it. Told not to come for Thanksgiving. Elderly man collapses alone. His granddaughter fights back. More stories followed. News blogs, morning shows, even a national podcast reached out. I never asked for attention. I just wanted to protect Grandpa. But with attention came something unexpected support. Letters and messages poured in, some from people who remembered Grandpa as a teacher, others from strangers who had survived the same kind of quiet, invisible betrayal. My dad was cut out by his own kids when he turned 80. He passed thinking he'd done something wrong. Thank you for showing people that silence isn't kindness. Sometimes it's complicity. One message stood out above the rest. It was from a woman named Rochelle. In 1989, I couldn't afford a math book for my daughter. Mr. Monroe found out. He handed me his own and said, "Return it when she no longer needs it." She went on to become a statistician. "You're doing the right thing." I read it out loud to Grandpa the next morning in his hospital room. His color had returned. His eyes were alert. When I finished, he blinked hard and whispered, "I remember Rochelle. She had kind eyes." Then he turned to me. "You shouldn't have to fight this hard just to be heard." I squeezed his hand. "Maybe, but I'll keep fighting anyway." That same day, we got a call from the bank. Cynthia had tried to authorize a withdrawal again, claimed she had verbal consent. The account had already been flagged. The call was recorded, and now there was enough to expand the case into criminal fraud. I signed the updated complaint that night. My hands shook, but I didn't hesitate. I stared up at the family photo still hanging in Grandpa's hallway, one I'd always hated. It was from 10 years ago, Dad's Cynthia Grandpa in the background, like he didn't belong. I took it down. I replaced it with a different photo, one from my high school graduation, just me and Grandpa, his hand on my shoulder, both of us smiling like we didn't need anyone else in the frame. This house didn't belong to guilt anymore. It belonged to truth. 3 days later, an envelope came in the mail. No return address. Grandpa recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Greg. I opened it and read the words aloud. "I failed you both. I see that now. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm sorry. Not because I was caught, but because I finally understand what I lost." I looked up at Grandpa. He was quiet. Then he nodded. "Too late for some things," he said. "Not too late for all." We didn't reply. Some healing doesn't need words, only distance, boundaries, presence. That weekend we did something small but symbolic. We repainted the porch steps, the very ones he had stood on waiting. Grandpa held the brush. I held the ladder. It wasn't perfect. We splashed white paint on the bushes and I stepped in a tray, but by the time we were done, those steps looked new, solid, clean. Later that night, I asked Grandpa something I'd been too scared to say out loud. "Do you want to move?" He looked at me surprised, then shook his head. "This house has seen the worst of them," he said, "but it also saw you come home." I nodded. I understood. This wasn't a house to abandon. It was one to reclaim. That same night, I opened a blank sketch pad and began outlining something new, a children's book. Not about betrayal, but about a man who waited on a porch, and the one person who came back. Its working title, The Man on the Porch. Winter came early that year. The snow started before December had even begun blanketing the yard outside Grandpa's house in soft white, like someone had hit reset on the world. The same porch steps he had once collapsed on now held our chairs side by side each morning and late afternoon. But it felt different now, not just safer, quieter, the kind of quiet that doesn't hurt, the kind that doesn't leave questions hanging in the corners or apologies buried beneath expectations. It was a silence of presence, not absence. I had given up my lease in Seattle, put all my freelance design clients on hold, packed my life into a storage unit, and came home, officially, permanently. Grandpa joked that I'd downgraded from skylines to squirrels. I told him the squirrels had better manners than most people I knew. He laughed so hard he had to sit down. We turned the guest room into Sophia's room. He insisted on calling it that. I filled it with Grandma's old quilt watercolor plants by the window and the recipe cards he once gave me. It didn't take long to feel like home. Each day had its rhythm. Tea at 8 a.m. when he was strong enough. A short walk if the weather allowed. A nap around noon. Some afternoons we'd sort through shoe boxes of old letters, photos, newspaper clippings from the decades he'd taught high school. I scanned them, digitized them, preserved what no one else had thought to save. But my favorite moments were the ones in between, like the sound of his laugh when I overcooked the oatmeal again, or the quiet thank you he whispered when I helped him into bed even when he didn't need help, or the way he once looked out the frosted window and said, "I always thought I'd leave this house feeling like a burden, but now I feel like I left a legacy." I reached across the table and held his hand. "You didn't leave one," I told him softly. "You lived it. Every single day." And he had. No amount of court filings or frozen bank accounts could define that. Yes, legally the case against Greg and Cynthia moved forward. Elliot handled it. Depositions were scheduled. The DA began reviewing financial records for criminal charges. But honestly, I didn't track every update. I didn't need to. The truth was already out there. And sometimes, truth is more powerful than justice. Sometimes it's the reason people finally stop pretending. One snowy evening, a letter arrived. No stamp, no return address, just placed in our mailbox like a ghost had written it. It was from Greg. "I failed you both. I let someone else's approval matter more than blood. I don't expect forgiveness, but I finally understand what I lost. You showed up for him when I didn't, and that matters more than anything." I showed the letter to Grandpa. He read it quietly, then folded it once and tucked it into the fireplace. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said too late for apologies, but maybe not too late for change. We didn't reply. Some things are better left unsaid because peace doesn't require performance, only boundaries. That night, we watched the snow fall from the living room, the fire casting soft shadows on the walls. He sat in his recliner, sipping chamomile tea. I sat on the floor beside him, sketching the final pages of The Man on the Porch, the children's book I'd started weeks ago. It wasn't about bitterness, not even about revenge. It was about hope, about how sometimes, even when the people who were supposed to love you walk away, someone else turns around and stays. It was about choosing to show up. And that story, his story, deserved to be told. 3 weeks later, the local news invited us to speak again. This time, not about the betrayal, but about the book, about elder protection, about second chances. Grandpa wore his green tie, the one he used to save for holidays. He said it wasn't just about dressing up, it was about being seen. The anchor asked him what message he wanted to leave viewers with. He cleared his throat and said, "I waited on that porch because I still believed people could change. But the only person who came was the one I never stopped believing in." I couldn't speak after that, and I didn't need to, because we weren't broken anymore, we were rebuilt. Have you ever watched someone you love be erased by the very people who should have protected them? Have you ever been the only one who showed up? If you have, this story is for you. Share your truth in the comments. Let someone know they're not alone. And remember, Family isn't just who you're born to. It's who stands on the porch and waits, and who walks up the steps when it matters.